Good evening, select crew. I'm sure that we'll have more people join us in the next few minutes, hopefully. Welcome to the second Truro Civic Society Zoom talk. You will recall the first one with Robert Loci, and Robert Loci was talking about the landscape appraisal, which has now been undertaken and is going to form part of the new neighbourhood plan. Of course, understanding landscape and particularly understanding the townscape and the interaction between town and country is a really important thing, and it's got a lot to do with as much to do with people's perceptions as it's got to do with physical characteristics. When I was a very young councillor, around about the 1980s, not 1971, I met a chap called David Burma. And at that time, there was lots of kerfuffle around Marks and Spencer's moving across town, and what were we going to do about Lemon Key and so on. And David Burma appeared magically, having done some really good work on the moor in Falmouth, I think. And he kind of led the conceptualization of what Lemon Key could be, and his influence is still there. And he said something which I think is of profound importance. I'm sorry if I'm stealing this from you, Michael, but he said it, well, I was there when he said it. And that is, he said, never do anything in a town that you can't undo, because everything changes. I think that's a very profoundly important point to make when I look at Boscawen Street with its flower pots. And so tonight we've got Mike and Trish Hawes, who are the principals of a practice in Truro called Mei Loci, which Mei Loci, they tell me on their website, is Latin for my place, which is a good title. I think it's enigmatic and hard, sticks in the memory. And they started out working in Truro with David Burma, hence the link. And they are domiciled in 67 Lemon Street, quite a famous address, although I can't quite remember why it's quite famous, but there's a reason for it, I seem to remember. And I'm sure that Michael and Trish will explain the principles of what they do and the philosophy of how they set about it. So they're going to talk about the landscape opportunities for Truro as we go through a period of what looks like being quite radical change. May or may not be, of course. All things might change, but then again, nothing might. I said that. Without further ado, let us welcome Michael and Trish. And I think Michael's going to lead. Is that right?
Yeah, Mike will be doing the talk. I'm here to
right. Mike will be doing the talking.
Thank you very much, Bert. I'll share my screen in a moment, but just quickly touching on what David did on Lemon Key. I've got a slide within this that goes into a bit more detail about that because it is very relevant. I think the way that we've structured this talk is not about proposing anything for Truro, it's about the principles of what we do and how that is applicable to Truro. Really is a means of giving you an indication of what's being taken forward nationally and in fact globally as the principles for urban regeneration. And how that may affect your judgment of any proposals coming forward from other consultants and organisations. So I will share my screen now.
Just while you're doing that sharing, I should point out to everybody what Edwina told me was the first thing I should say. So it's not, of course. And that is that this session is being recorded. And you should just know that and take necessarily evasive action if you wish to. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So obviously this is a key view, which we'll touch on again throughout the talk. So what I just touched on then, which we're going to go through. So an introduction to us. A little bit of background about why we need to take action, why we need to do what we are doing in Truro, how it's applicable to Truro, the principles of urban regeneration, including Lemon Key, but others you may be familiar with, of how this has actually been put into practice. So Mei Loci, we call ourselves Mei Loci, other people call us Mei Loci. but anything really, it's a memorable name and we love it. But we're based in Truro, currently in 67 Lemon Street, though about to move to slightly larger premises at the Bakery Studios, Blewitts Wharf. We've been here for 10 years. Prior to that, Trish and I both worked with David at More Design. Our work has, as you can see just in these examples, taken doing heritage interpretation and working in historic landscapes is a very big part of what we do. And often the reason that we are brought on board on a lot of these projects is the way that we work sensitively with historic context and bring it into a contemporary society. We have a great knowledge of Truro. I was educated here, my brother and sister were educated here, our children have been educated here. We lived here, we still live here and work here, and my father ran a business, our family business, prior to that in Truro. So we've run business in Truro for 50 years. So I know it well. I feel I'm allowed to be a bit rude about bringing it's also.
Proud to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so the national situation. We are part of the High Street Task Force, which was it was put together last year. So we've got lots of resources that we can tap into that give us the situation and from a statistic point of view. So I won't bore you with too many, but I put a few down. And we need to understand this both from prior to COVID and post-COVID, because it's very important how that has now affected our town. We're all absolutely sick of it, pardon the pun, of the way that COVID is affecting our lives, but we do need to understand it. But this quote from Bill Grimsey, who has been quite instrumental in putting together some documents about the decline of the high street and what we need to do. I'm going to read a lot of what's on the screen, partly because I never know what you're looking at this through. It could be a phone. So even before we went into lockdown, our high streets were facing an existential crisis. It's not just their survival that's at stake. Questions need to be asked about their very purpose. And this is a very key point. And actually, interestingly, I was looking at a seminar a few months ago, and there was questions obviously about the extent of retail and our changes in terms of how we shop. And one of the main issues for town centres, city centres now is actually we possibly had too much opportunity for retail. There were too many shops. The variety was disappearing, and that's also something that we're looking to address. So here's some statistics. So changes and decline of turnover in specific areas. I won't read them all out when you've got a copy of this, but it's quite alarming. Effective online spending, we knew that it was an issue. What we've got here on the left is the predicted 2030 was 30% online spending. The one on the right actually shows what's happened with COVID, is that at the peak of COVID, we'd already gone up to 33%. So we were 10 years, we jumped 10 years forward. So aiming towards a 53% increase in online or percentage of online spending, which is terrifying, but predictable. So what COVID has done, and this is a common theme, is it has accelerated a natural change that is happening within our city centres. Footfall. Footfall is the absolute underpinning element of our city centre. We need people there. We need to attract them in, and this is an indication of the fall in footfall over recent years. And then we have to cope with the new normal. What is the new normal? Yes, it's influenced by COVID, but it was happening anyway. Working from home, higher satellite shopping centres, less commuting, flexible working hours. These are all elements that actually are affecting the way that we use our cities. Having fewer people working in the city, often you get council resource, for example, is in larger buildings outside city centres, town centres, which is all influencing the amount of opportunity that retailers and trades and attractions have to generate income within the centre. So it's it's coping with the new normal and how we address this. So these may be items that we can discuss afterwards. We generally agree that we cannot go on as we are within our town centres, city centres, and on our high streets. We need to act on evidence to redefine our high streets so it's undeniable what's happening, activate, animate the town, diversify its attractions, create multifunctional spaces, draw in footfall, again in bold because it's so important, and increase spend, challenge status quo and be visionary in our responses, keeping an open mind, not forgetting temporary activation of space. I put Bert's flyer in here now. But also I just want to draw, make a point that when the market was on Lemon Street during the food festival, it was fantastic. I don't know how it's functioned for the people in the market, but a number of people commented on how lovely it was to start coming down Lemon Street and see the market there. It's about animating space and striving for 365-day, 24-hour economy where possible. Obviously, that is quite something to achieve. But if we can move towards that, then we are addressing a number of issues. Yes, financial viability, but we're also addressing potential antisocial behaviour. Footfall is not just about making money. It's about populating a space with people where you've got the people that you want to be there, and there's less likely to be any antisocial behaviour. So it's like a passive surveillance. So how is this applicable to Truro? Bert touched on before, but there are a number of big, exciting projects proposed in the pipeline in concept form for Truro. I've listed some of them there. Things are happening. What we have been dealing with a lot, and I think you'll agree, is there are often proposals for quite aspirational projects. Big budget projects, not all of these are, but big budget projects which are going to make a big change. The issue is with those is that they do take time. They will make change, it will be positive, but they take time. So what we need to do is act in the short term as a means of facilitating and helping that long-term goal. I'm going to go through some examples in a minute, but these are simply elements which we can look at to make improvements. Simple things, quick changes, very cheap changes. So identifying and capitalizing on existing character and assets. So that's applicable to every site that we work in, and that's where the company name comes from. It's about place, it's about context and character. Decluttering the public realm. Again, I've got examples of this, but often we are asked to make proposals. So you're adding things into a public realm. Yes, you've got new shiny things, but actually what about the old rubbish? It's very easy to take away stuff that is no longer of any use. And it makes a massive difference to the way that people can access, physically access, but also the aesthetics and the visual permeability between spaces in a town or city. Adopting a consistent approach to design and brand. This is about coming together as a number of organizations and bodies within a city. Every town or city we go to has got a town council and a bid and a number of organizations. All of them have an aim, a goal, a purpose, agenda, and a budget. They don't always communicate. So what you end up then with is a clash of design, a clash of approach. Not always, but then what you begin to lose character, and character is key. One of the problems we've had in the past is pre-COVID, this is 10 years plus ago, is the issue of a clone town. And actually Truro is one of those that was not having so much of a problem with that. It's the clone town. So if you're looking up at the shop fronts, they all have the similar frontage. And the problem with this, what I'm saying is a consistent approach to design and brand, is if you can identify your character and what your assets are within a town or city, you can use that to define the way that you sell your space. Place to be proud, pick up on those elements. Activating the high street, activating or animating, it's where the pop-ups come up, it's where markets come up, it's where consultation events. So we're working on a number of Vitality Fund, which you might be aware of, projects. It's a 12-month process to define a way forward. So it's a design-based, proposals-based, research-based work. But there's nothing stopping us running workshops to achieve those goals that actually begin to benefit where we are. So if we're running workshops that actually can animate a space and allowing people to experience what the potential is in a city, then you're already starting to make
Oh, okay. We're away again, Michael.
Right. So acknowledging requirements for change. So we do need to change. We can't ignore that. And looking at repurposing underutilized spaces and places. There's a lot of opportunity within the city. It's looking at where those ownerships lie, where the permissions lie, and what we can do in them. And it doesn't need to be permanent change, but we can activate those spaces and look at how we can actually benefit from them. So identifying character and existing asset. I mean, Truro is fantastic. We've got so much here that we can draw upon. The cathedral obviously is prominent. The river is beautiful. But so many spaces and elements and so much history and culture that there's ample to draw upon. I just want to put this in now just for discussion, because this links back to some of the issues that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. This is Lemon Key. David's aspiration for the space was one that is buzzing and populated and flexible. Why do we, you may know, I struggle with it, why do we need a multitude of bollards plus balustrading or vehicular defence? It's about joined up thinking. We don't need both of those. I've never seen that before.
Oh.
The bins, simple to achieve. We do need bins, but it's just about thinking about where they can be placed. Line markings, we've got beautiful granite paving. We don't need to do line marking like this. There's other ways to achieve it, and it's about there's degraded bollards. The one bottom third from the left is a particular issue that I have, and we in the office, I not being any worse than the thermoplastic that was there before that. I really struggle with that. If you're going to go to the expense of replacing something, I think it's important to acknowledge where we're going to go in future. I suspect the Boscawen Street, is not going to be replaced with a thermoplastic imprinted surface. So why would we do it on Lower Lemon Street? I don't know. So it's about clutter. There's one image which I think is quite important, is top right. I can't see it properly because it's behind all your faces. But this is what I was talking about just joined up thinking. There's a really nice signage strategy which has been adopted through Truro. I think it works well. But the problem is that there's also the historic signage. So I think in that space, there are four or five signs, definitely four. All of them have a different purpose. Some of them are old. One of them certainly is obsolete. So you are, by having all of those there and not replacing or rationalizing those, you are taking away both visual and physical access through a very difficult spot there. Actually, you kind of ducking underneath the sign to see if there's anyone coming, see whether you go left or right. It's quite a tricky one. Simple to fix, easier to get it right in the first place. But actually, we did originally bid for doing that signage strategy, and part of our original proposal was to, first of all, before putting anything in, was to take things out. There is a lot of obsolete signage, and that as soon as that starts coming out of a city centre, you can just see it's clean. It's a nice place to start, and then you know where you can go from there. Boscawen Street. This is a potentially controversial one. Obviously, if you look through the historic photographs, you can see that it has always been dominated by vehicles. This is going to be a controversial statement, but it is absolutely without doubt that if you do not change the balance between vehicles and pedestrians in a city centre, then that will not allow you to move forward. I have a particular issue with, and I've taken the historic photo there as well, because it's always had cars parked there. If you were talking about animating a space, one of the problems is easily finding a space that you can animate or that you can allow people access to. Our prime spot on Boscawen Street, where we can easily animate and activate and allow people to spill out onto streets and give people opportunity to sit, drink coffee, buy pasties, is a taxi rank. So our focal point on Boscawen Street is a taxi rank. I don't know the history of that. I know that we've always parked cars there, but these are the kind of things that we need to address. And it is controversial because it does represent change. But we've got enough space there to do something interesting. I think that, and I think Trish agrees with me, the planters, I applaud the idea. I think it works. I think you need to test how that spatially works. I think it's good. I think it could have been done slightly differently, but it's working. And the feedback we've had, and we spoke with Roger Gazard, and people are using it differently. They're sitting and resting. It's working. So as an experiment, it works well. But what we need to do is look at carefully, where do people want to sit? And this is about experience. This is when I go back to talking about the way that people, as a part of the engagement and workshop event process, is to allow them to experience the best possible scenario. So for example, if we were to make a wider space outside a cafe, rather than, for example, a chemist, then there's opportunity to put a couple of tables there and allow people to drink, so they can experience what it's like to actually sit and have a cup of tea sat there. Victoria Square, it is working. It's got more public realm. There's a greater balance of pedestrian versus vehicular. It is animated. It allows a little bit more to go on there, and you see people gathering. People will sit there, buy a pasty, hopefully go and buy another pasty, and then buy another one for their child. So it's about every person who brings an extra person into the city buys another pasty, which helps our economy, and which is again the principle of the engagement. I'm going to use St Austell as an example of an approach. We've been working on this for the last 3 years. It's a Coastal Communities Fund funded project. And we have been endeavouring to make significant change quickly and with limited budget, and minimising any disruptive intervention. So what we did is that the two smaller plans is identifying where people travel, left, right, so north, south, east, west, where the, oh, can you see my cursor? You probably can't see my cursor. But if you're looking at the top left image, the actual centre of St Austell is on the left of that conurbation, the left of that built up area. What we needed to do was to encourage people to move, and this is about footfall, from the eastern side where people were living, and rather than going to the supermarkets, we want them to walk or drive, but ideally walk to the centre and enjoy being in the space. So it's about giving. So I won't linger too long on St Austell, but the principle is that we are looking to increase footfall into the centre through easily achievable interventions that are embedded in the character, the history, the geographic context of St Austell. So it's all about trying to capture character. This is an example, taking it a step further. We were involved in the early part of the Truro Loops, which has then evolved to, and the group. And this is a prime example. The image on the left, the Loops, was the very original logo that Loic came up with, that one. But I think it's quite good because it's more explicit in what it's trying to achieve, which is connectivity between the outer areas of Truro and the centre, allowing access to Malpas, allowing access to the city. And this is interesting, and as I come on to the next slide, it'll make more sense. But this is the process here was about sort of an aspiration that actually has legs. And once you rationalize that and made it so that it's financially viable and acceptable, and people can understand what it's going to be, then actually you've got a project which is deliverable, finance pending, but actually it's got some really clear benefits. And that's, again, it's about increasing footfall. I just quickly put this together. I don't want to be too specific about Truro, but I wanted to pick up on some areas here. This is about connectivity, and it's giving people a reason to go to different spaces. There's a number of spaces around in Truro, which are, if you like, hub points. So it's about having a visual connection and a physical connection between points to pull people through the city, sorry. I'm too used to saying town, through the city. There are other spaces within the city which I think have huge potential with very minimum amount of work. So, for example, behind Lemon Street Market, the connection through to Walsingham Place, through to Victoria Square, all of these spaces, as soon as you give them a little bit of a tidy, decent way marking, possibly a place to sit, and you're like antisocial behaviour, which we're all very aware of behind our office here. But the principles are there. Increase footfall, give people reason to move. This is just a prime example of just the car park over Lemon Quay. It's cleaned up, it's repurposed, and you've got an extremely valuable spot. This photograph is actually from the very early days when the original planting scheme was in, which was what David was after, was the sort of broadleaf approach to the planters, which I think gave a scale, but it's a really nice clean image of the early days of Lemon Quay. So I'm going to move into some project examples. I'm mindful that this is taking quite a long time, so if you need me to hurry up, just
Oh, you carry on. You go on. This.
So regenerating and activating a town, city centre, a number of key items: character, history, location, context, and function. Those are really clear, and they need to be achieved in every site. And as we come on to the project in a minute, you'll see how that's been achieved. In addition, major things that serious things, important things that we need to consider: health and well-being, natural environment, biodiversity, and the financial viability. So financial viability, obviously, we're doing this for a reason. We're not just doing it to make it look pretty, it needs to function. Health and well-being is at the forefront. People have had difficult times recently, and we need to do something that is good for people, and that's what it's about. It's about the people. Natural environment and biodiversity, this comes on from health and well-being. They tie together. They are crucially important for our future and for our children's future. These are all of our projects coming up, and everything I've talked about, hopefully you will see elements of, if not all of, within these projects. Most recently, we have completed work on Penzance Promenade. Our original brief was more to do with resurfacing due to erosion, fixing it up, coastal fence, make it safe and strong. We said, you can do that, but it needs to be accepted. There's no point just ploughing through with some concrete. You need to do it properly. I'll continue talking about this project, but Trish worked on it more, so if I say anything wrong, she'll interject. But it's looking at historic context. Pink paving was, people think very fondly of the pink paving, but the pink paving could not stay. So we had to make a suggestion of history. We had to use concrete. We had to use Penzance Promenade as a catalyst for footfall. Obviously, it's not within the centre, but we could use it to improve way marking. The more people we can get onto Penzance Prom, engaging with it, being part of the design process, then the more we can begin to influence Penzance itself. So the bottom right-hand the plan there identified key points which aligned with the streets, the adjacent streets. So those street names that were embedded in the prom point you to them. So previously there was no visual way marking there. So it's a contemporary interpretation that embraces the historic relevance of the site, but also is strong enough, robust enough to withstand the coastal environment, and allows people to engage with it. This is about the activation and animation. So I'm just pass on to Trish just for a second to talk about this part of it.
So Mike's right. It was a very long expanse of concrete. That was our brief. What we wanted to do was bring elements of...
As we're recording, shall I carry on?
Yes, as long as the handover doesn't make any difference, which I doubt if it does. Okay, so let's soldier on.
So I won't linger too long on St Austell, but the principle is that we are looking to increase footfall into the centre through easily achievable interventions that are embedded in the character, the history, the geographic context of St Austell. So it's all about trying to capture character. This is an example, taking it a step further. We were involved in the early part of the Truro Loops, which is then evolved to, and the group. And this is a prime example. The image on the left, the Loops, was the very original logo that Loic came up with that one. But I think it's quite good because it's more explicit in what it's trying to achieve, which is connectivity between the outer areas of Truro and the centre, allowing access to Malthus, allowing access to the city. And this is interesting, and as I come on to the next slide, it'll make more sense. But the process here was about sort of an aspiration that actually has legs. And once you rationalize that and made it so that it's financially viable and acceptable and people can understand what it's going to be, then actually you've got a project which is deliverable, finance pending, but actually it's got some really clear benefits. And that's, again, it's about increasing footfall. I just quickly put this together. I don't want to be too specific about Truro, but I wanted to pick up on some areas here. This is about connectivity, and it's giving people a reason to go to different spaces. There's a number of spaces around in Truro, which are, if you like, hub points. So it's about having a visual connection and a physical connection between points to pull people through the city, sorry. I'm too used to saying town, through the city. There are other spaces within the city which I think have huge potential with very minimum amount of work. So, for example, behind Lemon Street Market, the connection through to Walsingham Place, through to Victoria Square, all of these spaces, as soon as you give them a little bit of a tidy, decent way marking, possibly a place to sit, and you're like antisocial behaviour, which we're all very aware of behind our office here. But the principles are there: increase footfall, give people reason to move. This is just a prime example. The car park over Lemon Quay. It's cleaned up, it's repurposed, and you've got an extremely valuable spot. This photograph is actually from the very early days when the original planting scheme was in, which was what David was after, was the sort of broadly approach to the planters, which I think gave a scale, but it's a really nice clean image of the early days of Lemon Quay. So I'm going to move into some project examples. I'm mindful that this is taking quite a long time, so if you need me to hurry up, just
you carry on, you go on.
So regenerating and activating a town city centre, a number of key items: character, history, location, context, and function. Those are really clear, and they need to be achieved in every site. And as we come on to the project in a minute, you'll see how that's been achieved. In addition, major things serious things, important things that we need to consider: health and well-being, natural environment, biodiversity, and the financial viability. So financial viability, obviously, we're doing this for a reason. We're not just doing it to make it look pretty, it needs to function. Health and well-being is at the forefront. People have had difficult times recently, and we need to do something that is good for people, and that's what it's about. It's about the people. Natural environment and biodiversity, this comes on from health and well-being. They tie together. They are crucially important for our future and for our children's future. These are all of our projects coming up, and everything I've talked about, hopefully you will see elements of, if not all of, within these projects. Most recently, we have completed work on Penzance Promenade. Our original brief was more to do with resurfacing due to erosion, fixing it up, coastal fence, make it safe and strong. We said, you can do that, but it needs to be accepted. There's no point just ploughing through with some concrete. You need to do it properly. I'll continue talking about this project, but Trish worked on it more, so if I say anything wrong, she'll interject. But it's looking at historic context. Pink paving was, people think very fondly of the pink paving, but the pink paving could not stay. So we had to make a suggestion of history. We had to use concrete. We had to use Penzance Promenade as a catalyst for footfall. Obviously, it's not within the centre, but we could use it to improve waymarking. The more people we can get onto Penzance Prom, engaging with it, being part of the design process, then the more we can begin to influence Penzance itself. So the bottom right-hand the plan there identified key points which aligned with the streets, the adjacent streets. So those street names that were embedded in the prom point you to them. So previously there was no visual way marking there. So it's a contemporary interpretation that embraces the historic relevance of the site, but also is strong enough, robust enough to withstand the coastal environment and allows people to engage with it. This is about the activation and animation. So I'm just pass on to Trish just for a second to talk about this part of it.
So Mike's right. It was a very long expanse of concrete. That was our brief. What we wanted to do was bring elements of...
It will change its moving forward.
Yeah.
Off we go. Trish, quick, while it's going.
So the challenge for us on the promenade was to make an active and animated space, which was essentially a flat surface without cluttering it up with lots of things. So to do this, we spoke to over 450 local residents of Penzance, as well as some visitors to Penzance who were interested, but we had events on the promenade itself where we had big plans laid out for people to come and make their own comments and tell us their stories. What we really wanted was to unpick the heritage of Penzance Prom, but also to hear people's contemporary stories about their lives now and their memories of the prom. And we spoke to people of all ages, from 3 years old up to 93 years old. And the stories that we were told were really diverse. And what we found out was that the prom was historically a bandstand, and they had tea dances there on Sundays. And so where you can see the footprints imprinted on the waltz, and on Sundays they came out and they promenaded in their finery and they danced along the prom. Today people run along it and kids follow those footsteps, but that story is embedded literally within the promenade surface. Further down along the promenade, or at the pier at Newlyn, is the tidal gauge, which sets the tide mark for all of the UK. And it's a really big thing. It's not many people know that it's there, but it's been working since the early 90s because of the effects of time and tide and the importance of that tidal gauge on Newlyn Promenade. That then links to a whole idea of navigating by the stars, the sailors of old, and children were involved in making these brass plaques with their own depictions of what they think is important in the environment around Penzance. And we had lots of images of pasties being stolen out of people's hands by seagulls, but also the rare jellyfish and crabs and lobsters which hatch in the water, in the seabeds just off the promenade, those stories through the imprints on the promenade itself to activate it and make it a little bit more interesting. So the heritage of the promenade was hugely important, and what we didn't want to do was clutter the space up with lots of stuff. So the treatment was very simple. It was a very limited palette of a mix of concrete colours, a sandy colour, which was named Cornish sand, black strips where we could have contrast and some interest, and then the pink inlays, which you saw earlier, which were exactly matched to the historic pavers by a specialist concrete company, and that is now known as Penzance Pink. And we worked very closely with the artist Ben Barrell, who creates these beautiful, smooth, tactile pebbles, and they just represent really what happens beyond the seawall, the river washed or the sea washed boulders, and also the boulders which have caused so much damage when they are washed up by the sea over the years. So what we've got now is a Penzance promenade, which is active. It's used by all walks of life, and you see people down there running, jogging, jumping around on the pebbles, skateboarding, and just generally just using it and coming together.
They loved it. It's been really well received by all the community, and happily has been shortlisted for a national award, which we'll find out about next month. But it's activation and references to history, culture, context. Shall I do this one?
Chatham, yeah.
So Chatham, this is slightly different because this is outside of the centre. This is in Chatham, Kent. And the reason that we've put this in is to show you historic features. People tend to resist change to historic form. But what we try and do, and Penzance Prom is the same, this is another one, is to respond to that historic importance. This is a scheduled monument. Celebrate it really, but also then address it and change it to allow it to be acceptable and functional and valuable for contemporary need. So in this case, this is an old casemates, a Napoleonic fort, which we changed into an amphitheatre. It celebrates the space, it's changed it, but people can now appreciate it. There's an income from it, it's animated. And importantly, if we're talking about footfall, there's a plan on the bottom right-hand side that just shows it's not directly next to the centre, but there is a connectivity. People come to it and from it, and it's an increase in footfall. So it's about character. And this is the one that actually is within the town. City,
yeah.
City. Sorry, I'm terrible with those. So this is actually fascinating. I'll just go into a little bit of detail, although not entirely relevant. But actually, this the central image was supposed to be a public realm and parkland. And as we were digging there, we discovered previously unrecorded tunnels. And these, I'm pointing at the screen, you can't see, but these 3 openings, all of which were in, one of them was almost as it was originally, one slightly more degraded, and then one further degraded, which we decided to leave open so people could see in the different sort of conditions in there. We found old, there's supposed to be a car in there, we didn't find a car, but there was old light bulbs, and it was an amazing site to work on.
This was all buried beneath a car park, and in the background of this image was a big building, which it was occupied by the council, which was condemned, and it was removed to open up the long view up to the fort, which is at the sort of the top of the hill in that image. So the original purpose of that public realm space was to connect the town centre to the fortress at the top of the hill, but in doing that, uncovered a wealth of archaeology and unknown history under there.
It's looking at historic character, really pulling on the character and the qualities that are an asset to a location, and restoring them, celebrating them, making them appropriate for contemporary use.
And making them accessible. That one of the challenges on this site was obviously the fort was built to keep people out. So huge high walls and very steep embankments, and one of our jobs was to be able to get people in there safely and accessibly.
This was also shortlisted for a national award, but unfortunately didn't win that one, but it did. It's good to be there. St Austell, we talked about it briefly. If you were to go to St Austell now, you'll see some of these interventions. We've come to the end of the first tranche of funding, but you can see the change in this St Austell project, or Austell project, is about ceramics and about gardens, the garden landscape. St Austell being surrounded by some beautiful gardens, plus also the ceramics and the links to Stoke. Biodiversity being a big part of it. But it's a really exciting, engaging project. I was going to say something else which I've completely forgotten just then, but the community, the China clay, the community engagement. So all of these tiles, not all of them, but most of them were made by from the bee image, were made by members of the community. It was about increasing footfall. There were festivals to celebrate this and to do making. So it's all of the bits, all of the component parts that we need to do within a centre, within the city centre, which bring people together. They can be a part of it. They can buy the pasty, they can make a tile, and then go back and check and see how it's evolving and changing. And this is done in a very gentle and sensitive way. These are some more of the artworks, and this is now snowballed. So there's now more funding has been acquired. The outcomes of this, which is small scale, achievable interventions Perfect timing. So I won't read this, but it's about small scale change and leading to a larger change within the street. And now I think we're ready for any questions.
Okay. So thank you very much, both of you, Michael and Trish. That was fantastic. I'm sorry it's been a bit broken up because of coming and going. But I think I have to say, I do admire the fact that you clung on to what you were previously saying, had the gap, and then got back straight into it. So I thought that was extremely good. There are a couple of points that I'd just like to ask you about. The first one is to do with branding. I have been never anything other than contemptuously critical of the notion of great little city, which seems to me to not say anything at all, which has got anything to do with Truro at all. And it just seems to me to be a sort of any idea of the nature of the town in what it says, and to me is something which we are reconsidering, particularly because times are changing very, very rapidly. Mainly, I suspect, not because of the depredations of COVID, which may or may not last for a long time, but because of climate change and all the things that are happening around that, and happening very, very quickly. And I think we need to look at that again, and not least because, as Heather was pointing out, that actually what climate change appears to be doing is creating opportunities for intelligent, smart local businesses to start doing things again. And to come back into the town centre, and I'd just be interested to know to take your view on that. And the other point, really, I think I'd make 2 points. The first one is that it is really important to bear in mind that Truro is tension between the two elements is obviously the town centre, but the second one is Newham, and that there is clearly an exchange in economic dominance going on there, because the sort of stuff that's going on at Newham is smart, it's intelligent, it's empowered with technology, it's looking at its manufacturing, environmental management equipment and so on, sensors and so on, and there is definitely a vibrancy about Newham, and that is actually feeding into and feeding off the town centre. And to me, one of the core that flows that we have along the bypass continue unimpeded, while finding the way in which to better connect Newham and the town centre. We're doing very well with the town fund in connecting Newham with Boscawen Park. And that will provide Newham with a very unique selling point, which is direct access to a major recreation facility, which is a great thing for Newham, a great thing for Boscawen Park. But I think up this end, where there's that economic dynamism that needs to be bonded, welded together, we're maybe not focusing on that well enough in order to achieve the outcome that would actually reinvigorate the town centre. And make sure that the town centre can contribute to sustaining the productivity and the innovation and so on Newham. And I think that's a real challenge. I'll be interested to know what you think about that.
Can I go with the Newham one?
Yeah.
I mean, Newham's an interesting one because they're from a resource point of view and an activity point of view. Truro has but there isn't that connectivity. And if we're talking about footfall, and this is again a classic example from Newham, it's very difficult to get through there. You cannot have a stroll along from the end of Newham through to Truro.
I'm thinking really about economics and productivity and adding value and keeping people employed.
That's what I'm leading to.
I think connections across the bypass for pedestrians and cyclists is the key thing. And I think the end of Lemon Quay, exactly what Mike was saying about clutter and the back end of things, that end of Lemon Quay is so unwelcoming across the bypass that it's that connection between Lemon Key, which really needs to be looked at very carefully, I think,
Yeah.
to make that connection and to capitalise on what Newham's actually got going on, but also for people in Newham to capitalise on what Truro.
That's right. That's precisely, the interconnection is really important. I think the most important thing is though that the environment of the town centre, which has fostered the growth over the last 50 years, has been that with the bypass removed the A39 from Boscawen Street, and that therefore de-trafficked without telling anybody they can't come into the town centre. It de-trafficked the town centre very substantially.
Yeah, but how pedestrians and other people who aren't in vehicles move across there is key.
That's the big challenge, I think. I agree.
And also for Truro to address its own waterfront. It's one of its major assets. That you can spend days in Truro and not realise that it's got a waterfront.
Yeah.
I think interesting, when we were doing the very original Truro Loops work, I was actually looking for one of the images earlier, but it's I couldn't find it. We were looking, it was about the benefits to the focus was on the river. That is a major asset. You've got the cathedral and the river are the two most visual assets in Truro, and the largest. You can't see the river, but we were looking at the geography. So 3 milestone means that Truro is going like that. It's stretching off. I'm doing this for you, not the right side for me. So it's becoming linear. So Truro needs to embrace that which is next to it, which is the river, in order to create that as part of the core. And the connectivity across Morley Avenue, across the bypass, is very important. And we were just discussing the other day, because we're moving office partly because we need a bigger space. I still consider Bakery Studios to be the centre, but we were discussing about how we can easily, we like to go as an office, go out and buy our lunch, and we will still come into Truro. So we're thinking of buying a couple of bikes with basket and taking it in turns, getting sent across on a bike to come and buy a basket full of sandwiches. But I think it's, I think it's that opportunity and facility. And if we can make access work, and it comes down to access, then the economic share will come from that.
Okay. Anybody else got any questions? Sorry, Trish.
Yeah, we haven't answered all of your questions. The first one was about the branding and the idea of as the great little city. And I think I agree with you that that's a very safe strap line that doesn't offend anybody. And
I think it insults the whole town, personally.
They've gone with it, but you're absolutely right that it doesn't capture what Truro has got as assets. And like Mike just said, it's the cathedral and it's the rivers, but it's the fact that we have a very strong cultural centre within a county, which has also got a really strong independent culture of its own. And I think there's something about the sort of the deep resonance of Cornishness that Truro has kind of at its beating heart, which could be captured in that. And I think Truro is so unique in the fact that it is a city. It's on the doorstep of an area of outstanding natural beauty. It's got an immense mining heritage, a medieval heritage, but also a thriving contemporary culture. And I think it's very hard to capture all of that in 3 words. But I think there could be work to be done on that.
Yeah. I think the thing that captures the brand of Truro most effectively is actually the word Truro. And I think we would do well to just simply focus on the name, which has its derivations in the geography of the town and why the town is here, you know. And all this lusting after strap lines is all very well, but it's kind of a distraction from the fact that what you're really marketing is the place, which has got a name.
Do you mind if I share? I don't want to bang on about St Austell too much because this is about Truro, but a big part of it was branding, a rebrand.
Yeah.
And I wonder if I could share something with you again, if that's it, if it's interest to you.
Please.
But it was a long process. Hopefully you can now see so this is called the Austell project down here. Can you see that screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the website. This is St Austell website and the Austell project. And what the purpose of the Austell project was, and this is obviously St Austell is using its name and the graphic, and it's less about the graphic, but it's the sky tip, which is iconic in St Austell. But Austell project is essentially a vehicle for selling the things which are typical of St Austell. So there's ceramics, the green, the active, and the innovate. And what this is looking to do is trying to pull people together with innovation, so it's technology, allow people access to the active. So it's a play on words, but actually it captures it very nicely, but it still is embedded in St Austell as the brand. And if you look into any of the information about regeneration or revitalization of the high street, they do talk about brand. They say you need to rebrand, you need to excite people. So the principle of this was that we didn't want everything to then be under St Austell, because St Austell as a place had its own identity, its own website. But the Austell project is all of those sub-projects that sit within it and try and link into those to give people the opportunity to grow and be part of it. And I think it's a really exciting approach. And I think you're right, Bert. The name and the character is absolutely key. The Truro, people know Truro.
It was done us for 800 years, you see.
Yeah,
done quite well.
Hopefully you saw from that, the Austell project was obviously a lot of consultation went into that. It responds well. It's just it's an evolution, and it's something that people could engage with. But it's exciting and new, but not too far away from what it actually is.
Heather's got her hand.
Any other questions?
Yeah, hi.
Heather.
I can see that you are incredibly creative people, and is a question really for Bert. Who are our creative directors for Truro? Who are our main branding people? Who do we go to? Is there a central place, or are there lots of pockets of different subgroups?
I think yes, that's a, well, that's a, yes. I think that if we're undertaking an exercise to try and identify brand, and I find those exercises so annoying that I absent myself from them these days, because I make everybody angry, and I get very angry myself because I find that the nature of the discussion is so appallingly juvenile. Anyway, but we tend to commission consultants. So you will find that the people who are anxious about this will be Truro City Council, which of course has the visitor information place attached to it, and brand and marketing profile is really important to them. And then you've got the bid. Now, the bid is an interesting body because the bid rejuvenates itself every 5 years. It has to have a ballot on a renewed business plan, and we've got a ballot coming up. Now, the bid was actually a key mover about 10 years ago on this great little city stuff, and they actually commissioned a marketing consultant who actually was quite small and thought he was very, very good guy. And I think that's where the great and little came from personally, but still that's a different matter. He led a series of workshops, all of which were as exasperating as the next. And they sort of, through some osmotic process, came up with this thing. And then because they'd all come up with it, they all thought it was great, so they stuck to it anyway. And I don't actually recall anybody being consulted on the matter. It just seemed to materialize, and then there was a lot of money spent on all the materials to make it happen, and we've lived under its mantle ever since.
Well,
So
this is what I get worried about.
the body, yes, I mean the bodies that actually do this work, well, I mean there's Mei Loci.
So you are commissioned for Truro?
Well, no. They're a company.
Yes.
Who, if there is a contract available, will undoubtedly pitch for it. But there are probably a dozen other companies who will do that as well. There's not a public sector branding facility. It's all done through somebody says let's do that, and then you get a commission, then you get select. Now, one of the real issues for me is when the public sector, your council, for instance, set about doing something like, for instance, a rebranding exercise, they go to people whose expertise is branding, and they've got the money to actually pay for it, but when it actually comes to the selection process, have they got the people who are adequately qualified in order to be able to make judgments about which is the best pitch? And therein, I think, lies a problem for us all. Because I mean, I've seen people select contractors who knew absolutely nothing about what they were talking about, and I mean, I remember seeing one who was selected on the basis of how shiny his shoes were. And so on, you know, and so that was some time ago, I have to say. But you know, it's a bit of a hit and a miss process. And actually, what you end up with are very important things like the brand of a town actually end up being a pretty hit and miss process, which is dependent on personalities rather than on any particular case that is advanced and demonstrated to be, you know, proven.
Well, I think that's what you can see in Truro now. There's lots of
I think there's a great problem in Truro, and that is that you've got a number of institutions, all of which are pulling against each other, rather than all coming together. And I think that's got to do with the fact that I think that goes back to 1974. When the leadership of the town was wrested away from the borough council and placed in the hands of the district council, which actually had 2 or 3 towns all vying for attention within it, and we haven't got over the impact of that. And at the moment, I think Cornwall Council, which has replaced all those districts, and in many ways, by and large, is a far, far better thing because it competes. It puts Cornwall in a competitive position in the national picture. But I think as far as its relationship with localities in Cornwall is concerned, I still think that we're pushing and shoving to find the balance. And at the moment, I would say that if any particular locality, whether that's Truro or Sundalston or Bodmin or Bodmin Moor or the Lizard, if any of them look like they're taking a bit too much in the way of ownership of their place, Cornwall Council come lambing in and say, no, we're in charge. And there is that kind of, you know, adolescent aspect to it.
This is exactly it. Anyone who's creative gets squashed on by people who think that they know better.
I'm not entirely certain that's altogether the case. I think that creativity needs to be businesslike if it's actually going to be competing for business-like contracts. I think the problem is that what tends to be flawed at the moment is the commissioning process, i.e. what it is that the public sector actually want. How do they define it, and who do they attract to compete for it, and how do they select the successful one? Those processes, they are at a very formative stage, I would say, and so consequently we've got some issues about leadership, really.
So how transparent is that information about?
Well, if you want to go digging, you can find out about it.
Yeah,
you've got to have a pretty sharp spade.
I shouldn't have to go digging, should I? I should, you know,
those tender processes are fairly rigorous, but I think you've touched on two things that I think are problematic there. One is design generally is very subjective.
Yeah.
Some people love what we do, some people don't like what we do. But what we find is that engaging people in the conversation and listening to opinions, and I'm not talking about watering down vision, but enabling people to feel some sort of sense of ownership and having been part of that conversation is really important. The second thing is that budgets are always limited. So a vision is inevitably scaled back and watered down, and you know that the money has to stretch further than we probably all expect it should have to stretch, and that is part of the problem. I think the outcomes are not always.
I think I'm also right to say if you need advice, there are people who are in Truro who can be approached at least to give an indication. I mean, there's 2 companies who do this. There's us and Levine Lonsdale across the street. Both companies have done fantastic work. I believe ours is. There's obviously, I would say it's not as good as ours, but they are a very good company. We're a resource in Truro, and we'd much rather give people some advice as to how to move forward than it just to happen. I think at the beginning of the Truro Loops, we did all of that initial work without fee. because we believed in the project.
Yeah.
And it's become a really exciting project.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things about the town fund, which is really interesting, is that because there's 23.6 million somewhere dangling a purse at the end of a government rainbow, not quite sure where it is yet, haven't seen any of it, but because that money is there, and because actually we were talking about the town and how to rejuvenate the town, what I find most impressive is that the professional community has kind of gathered around the project in an incredibly great way, a good way. You know, a lot of pro bono work has been done. There's obviously everybody's expecting that of that 23.6 million, some of it will flow their way, and quite rightly so it should. You know, and I think that what I would say that from the governance point of view of the project, we've had a bit of a battle to make sure that the resource that all the local businesses and practices have bought into, that actually the rewards will be there. Because some people, not a million miles from Town and their great concrete fortress, thought that they would get one or two big companies from up country to come in and sort it all out for everybody. And we've objected to that and said no, you know, because it seems to me that the rejuvenation isn't just about changing the physical aspect, but it's also about creating opportunities for business as well, because that's the town is the combination of the place and the business within it. You know, because if the business is prospering, the town will prosper, and you know, it's vital, and that's where we need to make sure that we're focusing our investment opportunities.
You'll notice there's a question
but
as well.
you've got a question.
Yes.
2 more questions, I think.
You've got a question from Stuart Roden.
Oh, go on then. Where is he?
It's a hot one.
Can't see him.
No,
Oh, yes, I can.
he's here, yeah. Should the bus lane across Lemon Key be removed permanently?
Is that a question to us or to everyone?
Yeah, question to you, Michael.
Yes, I think it should. I think logistically and feasibly, while the bus station is there, it's not going to be viable unless I'm missing something. That space would work better being completely visually and physically permeable. I think as soon as you introduce something like a bus lane through there, then it compromises the space. And
Yep, I agree. Yep.
I think, wouldn't we all just like to see water?
yeah.
Boats
Yep.
back in there, boats back in
I
there.
mean, there is a
It's a
proposal.
compromise.
I'm not sure who did the proposal, which is part of the town deal, which is a balance, and I think there are opportunities. I mean that, but probably a number of you know better than me. But where the bus station is now, I believe, is supposed to be common land, or is
It's allegedly land that is covenanted to the people of Truro for their recreation and pleasure. It's known as the Green.
and so we can enjoy the time in the bus station.
Well, the compromise is that the bus. I mean, basically, too many cooks and Carrick District Council. The chief executive of Carrick District Council decided to move the bus station onto the Green and away from Lemon Key. It was basically where Primark is now. And when they did that, they cut the bus station off from direct access to the bypass via the Fairmantle Street roundabout, which was foolish. And they created a problem in the town because, of course, the district council wasn't the highways authority, and therefore when they were doing the deal over the bus station, they didn't discuss with the highways authority what the traffic implications would be. And so consequently we moved it because it was expedient to make way for the Marks and Spencer's development, because that was going to produce a lot of money for Carrick District Council because they were going to get the income from the car park. And so there's all these wheels within wheels where local authorities start to act in their own corporate interest as opposed to in the interest of the communities that within their area of responsibility. And that's a difficult tangle, but that ended up with the bus station being where it was. The compromise is that they tried to sell it to the bus company. And there was an objection to that, in which I was part of. And in the end, they could not disprove the assertion that it was covenanted to the people of Truro. And so therefore the compromise is that it is leased to the bus company and still owned publicly.
Okay, interesting.
It is interesting.
I was discussing it earlier actually with our colleague Graham, And if we don't need to go down full pedestrianisation routes, but if we are to limit the amount of vehicular traffic within what we want to have as pedestrian accessible, safe access, then you need to have a bus.
Yes,
This service and facility.
I agree.
It's a real shame that it goes across Lemon Key. I can remember discussions with David very early in the project about his distress about having that across Lemon
I
Key.
think the missed opportunity was quite recent. I think that Cornwall should have bought the Staples site. And I think they should have moved Gareth Wharf car park onto the Staples site and put the bus station on the Gareth Wharf car park. And that would have given them the subway to be able to use for access from the bus station. It would have kept it within walking distance of the town centre. It would actually have moved the car parking into a more convenient space for the bypass, but slightly further away from town, so to some extent might have deterred parking or made it genuinely long stay. And I think that would have freed up the green. And we got as far as
that frontage.
Sorry?
It also would have activated that frontage.
No,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes, yeah. But then got footfall.
I mean, I actually wrote to the chief executive and pointed all this out to her and said I would really strongly urge you to use your investment fund to actually buy that site so that we can actually do it. And that would have given us the opportunity to reorganise the access to Newham, reorganise the access or the access to Fairmantle Street, and to do a range of things which would have been really, really helpful and probably improve the pedestrian crossing of the bypass.
But as you said, there are too many cooks that spoil the broth, and that's the problem. There are too many decision makers, too many people who have a hand in, well, this is viably, I want the money to come in my direction. I just wanted to quickly say that also, if you're going to stop buses going through across the quay, then and actually I still want to call it the quay, Boscawen Street, I think, is a nightmare at the moment, trying to cross it without getting knocked down by a taxi or a bus.
Heather, I agree with you entirely. I think that all these flower pots and the realignment of the traffic has turned Boscawen Street from a successfully and relaxed interaction between pedestrians and vehicles. I think it's turned it into a real tense and risky place for people to be. I don't think it's anywhere near as...
That's
I
how
agree
I feel
with you.
crossing it.
I agree.
That's how I feel
I
crossing
agree.
it. I'm going to say good night. I have to go.
Okay. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Absolutely fabulous. Thank you.
Don't forget the next one, which is on November the 20th, which is, I think I've got that right. 24th, the 24th, which will be Helen Fleming. Fiona Fleming, who is a landscape archaeologist. Michael and Trish might like to.
Awesome.
That would be interesting. She's going to do a paper about Truro at that talk as well.
Bob
Thank you.
got his hand up.
Are there any other? Sorry.
Bob has got a question.
Oh, Bob. Right. Sorry, I can only see half of you. Sorry. Right, Bob. Yeah.
I found this evening very interesting. It's been a very good...
We're not having a bit of trouble hearing you, Bob.
I'll get a bit closer. Can you hear me now?
Just about.
I'll turn the volume up a bit.
Yeah.
I was saying it's been a very interesting presentation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Some very interesting things. I am reassured that there are people who have got a realistic, rational and coherent idea of what needs to happen in Truro. It warms the cockles of my heart, I have to say. I started getting involved with this with having read Bill Grimsey's report in 2015 or 2014, and Bert and I differ on this because I said it's the death of the city centre, and Bert says no, it's not, it's change. And I said, yeah, but it's change in the wrong direction as far as I can. Anyway, COVID sorted that out. So
Bob won.
My concern is that whilst I am on the one hand reassured, I am also very concerned and frightened by the gap between vision and reality and how you get from one to the other. And there's what I call a reality gap. And it's centred around finances, but the gaps between the aesthetic vision and the commercial needs of certain groups are quite divorced from the community needs. And we need a mechanism that bridges those 3 points, I think. If you want to make, we've got a brilliant opportunity now with the Towns Fund deal to actually have some impact on this. But as far as I'm concerned, Bert's right about Truro, the 3 rivers and the 3 issues. Those are my 3 issues. The vision and the reality, the aesthetics and the commercial proposition, but how to integrate community into all of that. So yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it tonight, and I'd love to see how it all pans out in the next 2 or 3 years. So thank you very much.
Okay, did you want to make a comment on that, Mike? It wasn't really a question.
No. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I am inclined to agree. There's always a bit of difficulty joining the dots between the vision and the reality. I think leadership. Yeah, it's about Trish right about leadership. I think we and I think a big thing that you hopefully will take from what we've been presenting is that you've got really exciting big projects, and they will make a change, but there needs to be a joining up between the projects to make sure that what's in the middle isn't lost. And I'm talking about that from a geographic as well as a timescale basis.
I agree with that.
And hopefully everything that we've shown demonstrates that it can be achieved.
Yeah.
Something that I think a few people have picked up, and we've certainly picked up, is that there's got to be joined up thinking amongst the council, BID, you as a group, and the community. Everyone needs to be talking the same talk, and Newham BID. I mean, I think the world of Mel Richardson, I think she's excellent, but we need to make sure that everyone's communicating. And projects like the Loops, which Trish is working on at the moment, gives us an opportunity to actually create connections, both in a design sense and also getting people talking to each other, because we're in a position where we need to start to influence that.
I would like to see an opportunity for some of the bigger Truro businesses to be conversation. So, for instance, Cornish Mutual, Truro School. Truro School is the big single employer in Truro, other than Cornwall Council and the health service.
Wow.
And Cornish Mutual is a very wealthy company. You know, I mean, it's sitting down there. It's the kind of it's the linchpin of Newham. You know, and Root Note, you know, which is a really big commercial operation with an international reach, which is focused in Truro, and you know, employing a lot of young people in professional positions, which is enabling them to be competitive in the world and is committing them to living in the town. And if there's one thing we need to do is to find a way of encouraging entrepreneurial, innovative, creative young people to commit their lives to the town, so that actually they're creating, you know, all the problems that their children will have to deal with, just as we're dealing with our father's problems. And I think that I don't see the opportunities for those sort of conversations. The Towns Fund project has actually probably done more to bring the professions, the public sector, the charitable sector together than any other thing that I've seen in the last 20 years in Truro. The reason? There's 23.6 million quid's worth of ACCAs sitting on the end of it. And I mean, and that's a rarity.
We as young professionals, are we still young?
I put you down there. Yeah.
We're as young professionals. We've got we love our company, and we're genuinely excited about Truro, and these Towns Fund, these projects are a big part of that. Yeah. Because we also see opportunity. We see opportunity for us in our business. We see opportunity for work for us, obviously, but from a profile point of view, about enjoyment, and for our children. It really, I agree, it gives a bit more and also the local companies are involved in it, which is all the more exciting for us, because historically we've struggled to win projects in Cornwall.
We've travelled up country to get our work, and other companies have come down and done the work down here, which hasn't made sense.
Yeah,
actually COVID has kind of switched that balance a bit.
yeah, which is a good thing. Look, we're down to the bare rump of the old civic society here, and I think, well, that's not quite true actually. Caroline, we haven't heard a word from. Did you want to say anything while you're here? You're muted.
What I want to say is that I've listened with great interest and I've really enjoyed it. What it will do is make us look with new eyes at all of these places that you're pointing out. And thank you.
So I think we'll. Bob Moore. Bob Moore is the chairman of the Conservation Area Advisory Committee. You're muted, Bob.
I am. I no longer been. Yeah, thank you. Very good. I mean, I remember working with David, God knows how long ago, and I've always enjoyed the work that they've put out and about, your firm has put out about, as it is, and he was a sad loss. But talking about what Bob was saying there a minute ago about seeing things translated into reality, the old Western Promenade, or the whole promenade at Penzance, is a fantastic achievement. I think you really need to be applauded for that. I wandered down it again last weekend. I always like to be down in Penzance and to wander along all the way down to Newlyn and pick up a Gelbert's ice cream. I think in my whole lifetime, I've never left Newlyn without picking up a Gelbert's ice cream, whatever the weather. And it's really, really nicely done. And all of the landscape, the hard landscaping is very well presented. The selection of materials and the street furniture and so on sit well and differently. And tying it in with all of the applications in the concrete to the history and the local streets and so on work very well indeed. So, that's to be applauded. Like most people in Truro, we go to St Austell when we need to. It's not normally somewhere that one heads for, from will. And I'm very interested to see what you're proposing. I thought the way that was put together worked very neatly, and I will make another visit soon and just have a look and see what's been done, because it looked very promising. And if you can do it with St Austell, then
do it anywhere.
You better do it here in Truro.
Yeah.
And one of the things from your original chat about the proposals, the range of proposals necessary in Truro, was the decluttering, which is absolutely critical. Now, the city centre in so many ways is such a mess. There's so many bits and pieces all over the place. And a new trend that I'm getting reasonably het up about is the sandwich boards and A-frames that are cropping up almost everywhere. I've been taking photos of them all over the place, and when Bert and Armour will allow me 5 minutes to get on and look on that one whilst we're in the advisory group, I will try and present something more properly. Yeah. Even today, walking around, I noticed some more that have appeared, and there are so many shops that really don't need them at all. But I've tried to get an answer out of highways, who are responsible for pavements as part of the public highway, and so on and so on. So, there's something there that we'll be chasing. But yeah, in principle, it was very good talk, thoroughly enjoyed it, and appreciate very much what you're doing. And I hope if the opportunity does come to bid for it, that you will stand a good chance of success.
Good.
And thank you for inviting me along.
So I'd like to thank you both as the chairman. I just would say as St Austell that the most beautiful and wonderful and inspiring thing in St Austell is the tower of the church.
Yes.
Which has got an amazing gallery of medieval ecclesiastical sculpture all over it, which is in almost perfect nick mostly because it's in the lee of a hill and hasn't been weathered. And it's the most beautiful thing, wonderful thing. And it's been there forever, ever since St Austell himself and his mate St Mewan from down the road actually settled down there and decided they were going to split the place in two and never speak to each other again. So I'd like to thank you very much. There are some bits of which I agree and some of which I don't. I always worry when we talk about Truro at the moment that we always look inwards. We never look beyond the red line of Truro to think about all those people who we rely on to come into the town to spend their money, to do their business, to practice their professions, to simply do their work, and to access the public services. And if the town cuts itself off from its catchment area, from its hinterland, as it appears to be trying to do by turning all the lanes up between around Trelisk there into quiet lanes with no traffic going along them and so on, we're actually blocking up our own nervous system, which is really very, very serious, I think.
I would urge you to look at the Orspel Project website that I showed briefly.
I will, yeah.
It is absolutely about linking the hinterland with the centre.
Yes, and absolutely, and I understand that. Unfortunately, the quiet lanes up round Truro aren't, which is a bit difficult. But anyway,
I do hope that the loops will solve some of those issues.
Well, yes,
around the town centre.
One would sincerely hope so. Yeah, one would sincerely hope so. But there's the loops and there's the quiet lanes. And who's saying which is which, and who's saying who's doing what? And actually, that thing about leadership is quite serious, I think. Anyway, I'm supposed to be saying thank you. So thank you very much. I thank you both for the effort you've put into the talk and for the time you've committed to it and for your contribution to the life and the cultural life of Truro, because you're actually participating, which is really great, which is really good. And I hope you'll come and listen to Fiona. I think you'll find Fiona very interesting. Sorry?
Please do send us a link when
we most certainly will. And well, that's it really. I'd just like to thank you very much for what you've done tonight and for your work in and for Truro, which is absolutely brilliant.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Lovely.
Very good indeed.
So I think we're all going to go over and out now.
Okay.
Thank you all very much for coming.